Hello. Hey. Cafecito for us. Oh, who wants that coffee? How you been? Look at me, my hair. I didn't change my shirt. I gotta change my shirt. What's good, everybody on Facebook, YouTube? Voy GizzyCredit here, resolviendo. Oh yeah. Who knows the part of that song? Hold on. I'm back. First off, how you guys be? I hope you be well. Over here, and then Facebook, and then Instagram, and then YouTube. Thank you so much for everyone logging on. Really appreciate you guys. What's good, DL? Sandy. I got two Sandys. Are y'all the same ones? Sandy here. And what's up, Joe Me? Bien. Sandy, is that you on YouTube too? We're going to be able to braid your Yes. By the way, I have braids back in the day. Just to let you guys know. ¿Dónde está my hat? I got branding now. A lot of people enjoy my GizzyCredit. My GizzyCredit. Oh, that's not you. Well, I got another Sandy on YouTube. Sandy baby. What's good, Sandy baby? What's good, DL? Is it too late to send dispute letters and get them without being redisputed by the collection agencies? I'm gonna get to you today. Tune in, DL. DL. Hey, listen. This is stuff that we go through on a daily basis. Is educating you, people who want to be real estate investors. Anyway, let me get John on the line. We do this real quick. Okay. All your questions, put them on your comment box because we're going to get to all your questions today. Real estate is always a hot topic with us because a lot of people want to get into real estate investing. John.
Yeah.
Okay, great. John's coming through. We got the nice lighting going on right now. Got some people on Facebook and on YouTube at the moment, John. Ready to listen in. I made the artwork, and I got a lot of people interested in what we have to talk about today. You always know that with credit repair, there's always people wanting to get into real estate investing, and basically that's what's going to be the topic today. By the way, I go by GizzyCredit. This is John on the phone. John is the brains of it all. I do the social media with the GizzyCredit channel and all that stuff. We help people with their credit. More than 10 years experience, more than 10,000 customers. On a daily basis, people start credit repair with us. These podcasts are more for educational purposes to let you guys know that you have a team helping you achieve whatever goal you want to get to. So without further ado, let's ask the question. Every time someone comes to us as a credit repair customer, there's always something that they've heard on a credit board or in a real estate investing group, and they think they could do certain things. And when we get to speak to them, they don't actively know the numbers of how to go about doing things. And then John educates them. By the way, without further ado, John is an avid real estate investor. He has real estate properties. From what I know, Philadelphia, Florida. He has many rentals. He's flipped, from what he told me, over 250 properties. So it's not like we don't know what we're talking about here. We actually do know. And John is in GizzyCredit team, and definitely he's here to educate you guys. So without further ado, Brother, I just heard some of the dumbest things since I've done this. Okay, so Charles, you already know. Anyways, John, take it over.
Wait, what was that? What was that last part?
Oh, Charles Hopgood. He says, brother, I just heard some of the dumbest things since I've done this. Credit is begging and borrowing. John is the guru, he says.
That's a nice one. So I think one of the things that we have seen that comes to us on a regular basis, right? Obviously, the first step is always cleaning the credit, but the one thing that kind of hums around all the time is obviously people trying to open up credit in the name of a business and establish a business, because there's a lot of videos and stuff about that, right, wrong, or indifferent. And then the other thing we get a lot is questions regarding starting real estate and things like that. So, given the fact that our whole approach is to try and identify the topics that people are most misinformed about, or maybe not as educated as they could possibly be to make the right decision on their own, whether they utilize us or not. I think it's going through this particular topic will allow people to get a much better understanding. Now, this isn't me saying now is the right time to buy, by the way. Okay, this is just an educational understanding of exactly how a deal gets analyzed and how you can kind of arrive at basically do the finances on the deal and not have to just rely on an agent to give you deals, because unfortunately not every agent is built the same way, right?
All right.
A lot of there's some agents that are exceptional, and I would say that's in the top 5-10%. The other 90% in a lot of cases are all kind of volleying for the rest of the business, right? And the reality is they're just not as good as the top 10%. That's just the reality. I mean, I've dealt with every kind of agent you possibly imagine over the years, and if I didn't have to deal with an agent, I'd probably be happier. But the reality is, in order to submit deals,
why is that, John? You trying to call agents kind of dumb?
Say that again? No, I don't know. I don't think it's dumb. I think there's a motivation there in a lot of cases that may not necessarily be in the best interest of the buyer and or seller, right? The motivation is that commission, because they don't get any money coming into it, right? So if they can taste the deal, they're going to push the deal. I've bought. You talked briefly on the intro about how many I've bought and sold over the course of time. And I mean, you can just tell when there's a bit of a massaging going on as far as and that's why it's important to articulate your own opinion and be able to understand exactly the strengths and weaknesses of any deal you're being presented to purchase. Or if you're selling into strength, right, and you're selling a property, you want to make sure you get the top dollar and not just ignorantly and emotionally say, I want this price, right, without being able to validate exactly why it should be that price, right? Because you get that a lot. You get a lot of homeowners that'll say, I'm not selling it for less than 500. Well, the rest of the block's selling it for 450. You'll be sitting there for a long time, right? So, I mean, it's important. It's important to have an understanding, again, just a workable understanding. There shouldn't be all these foreign terms that people don't understand, because it's not that hard to understand, right? It's really not. It's just people choose, not everybody wants to really kind of dig out and expand their minds. They're stuck on other things. And I think, if people do understand, it would make all the decisions they make on a regular basis. We've touched previously on the auto loans and how to really protect yourself in that regard, right? We've talked about, a lot of the business related stuff. We've talked about credit, what lenders pull up bureaus. All this stuff is knowledge that gets so misconstrued over the course of time in YouTube and Facebook and stuff like that, that it makes it difficult. The people that even want to learn don't know where to learn. So, not to continue to harp on it, but that's kind of the purpose why we do this stuff, because it does make our job a little bit easier when half the time we're not having to dispel rumors that are on credit boards. I mean, I understand everybody's trying to get a basis of understanding. I completely understand that, and that's exactly what we're trying to institute here. It's just sometimes it can be a little difficult when somebody comes in with their mind already made up, and the stuff that their mind's made up about is completely wrong, because it takes a while to reverse engineer somebody's understanding, right? Especially if there's somebody that's a little bit of a hammerhead, and it's their way, or we talked about the one client a couple weeks ago, the guy who we helped through his sister, and we were on the phone for what?
That executive that works for Verizon.
Yeah, we were on with him for an hour, and I had to literally reverse engineer his understanding of Credit Karma. Now, look, he couldn't be any nicer now. He understands.
For real?
He asks. Oh yeah, I mean, he couldn't be any nicer now.
Oh, he's nice.
but listen, but you know what? But listen, it was the whole approach of the fact that you had to kind of walk him back and explain it exactly why this happened or that happened, and then I assume over the course of the next week to 2 weeks, when he saw the accounts come off and he saw the things do the way we described them that they were going to do, then it was like, okay, then maybe everything I learned here is not right? And then they started.
John, I thought you were going to just do one dispute and just go tell him to F off.
But it's not just that, though. It's the fact that if you look at the situation, you say to yourself, you're somebody that's been looking something and looking at it as a giant question mark for a period of time, where you don't think there's any real delineating, conforming to it, meaning like a way to determine why the scores went up or why they went down, right? For everybody, it's just this guessing game, but it's really not a guessing game. It's really not, for the most part. I mean, the exact amount of points, can be a bit of a guessing game. You should have a reasonable range, though, based upon certain extremes. But I mean, and he started to do it, and he started to see, based upon that long conversation we had and emails he and I have had since. And now he's all in. I mean, he loves it. So I mean, but the point I'm trying to make is sometimes people like that.
And there's a customer that's just he's up to his neck with debt that he just wants to refinance and save $350, which that's a significant amount of money on a monthly basis, don't you think?
I mean, $350 is $350. It's not a small amount of money, but $350 means a different amount for anybody. I think, generally speaking, $350, I mean, with the size of his mortgage, was absolutely meaningful, right? It represented a large amount of what he was refinancing, and it absolutely made sense. And it was, look, either way, it's understandable that people want to understand. That's why we do these, right? I want people to understand. I don't look at it as a waste, but having to take an hour and 15 minutes of the day and argue with somebody that they're wrong when they were 100%.
That's the difficult part of getting people online like you.
Wait, say that again?
No, I'm talking to the crowd. I'm talking to the camera. Like, they've been through so much.
That's why
these people have been through so much. I tell them it's like them going through a Walmart type of place that does credit repair. And Walmart's not going to have the best quality. Well, yeah, maybe some people can afford Walmart and they maybe, like the style of Walmart, but there are other options up there. There are other, levels of service that you get in this industry. That's why we consider ourselves up here top notch, because of the way that we position people, the way we educate people in doing what they want to do with their credit. But go ahead, John. Sorry about that.
No. I agree. I mean, I think that's kind of what we pride ourselves on, right? I mean, being able to explain and understand every aspect of this scenario and what we're doing. I mean, I think it's important, especially in something where there's just so many smoke shows out there, that you need, as a consumer, you need to be able to identify the difference, between somebody that actually knows what they're talking about and not. So, that all being said, one of the things that we get a lot of is people that want to invest in real estate, right? And, we've had to kind of reverse engineer the mentality with a lot of people that you can't be buying real estate on credit cards. Credit lines is a different conversation. They're amortized differently. And if you need detail on that, you go back we did an entire podcast on why you shouldn't be financing real estate on credit cards, obviously, because the amortization on them is short. Amortization meaning the length of time that you can pay back. So, for instance, a mortgage is amortized over 30 years. So the payment gets spread out over 360 payments if it's a 30-year loan. Right. When you take a 5-year auto loan, obviously.
Go ahead.
What?
Go ahead.
When you have an auto loan, it's spread over, typically speaking, I mean, now they'll go out 7 years, but I mean, typically speaking, it goes out 5 years, which is 60 payments. So, I mean, the amortization is a little tighter relative to a mortgage, but it also makes it more economical for people in the back and still get the return. A line of credit is typically amortized much like, I mean, depending whether it's secured or unsecured, either way, it's amortized much longer than you're going to have on a typical credit card. So, for instance, if you go and buy, I've used this analogy before, but just briefly, I don't want to dive too much into it. But if you used $50,000 on a credit card to buy a property in Milwaukee, which is, believe it or not, somewhere you can buy a house for $50,000, the minimum payment on that would be like $1,250, right? Because a minimum payment on any credit card is 2.5% of the outstanding balance, right?
Yeah.
So, if you were buying it on a line of credit, though, it would be a completely different scenario, because depending on if it was secured or unsecured, obviously, if it was unsecured, if it was secured, that same amount would be $50,000. You'll be paying about $100, $150, right? Okay. So you're talking about, and of that 2.5% on the credit card, that's like 80% of that is, 85% of that is all interest. So you're really not paying anything down. So, I mean, chances are on a $50,000 property in Milwaukee, you're going to get rent for $700, and you're shelling out 15, you're already upside down. It doesn't even make any sense. And the change, obviously you have to buy right to get out of it. So what we tell people is, buy with longer money on the front, and use the business cards and stuff to be able to assist with the renovation or the costs associated with it, because that's exactly what it's for.
Home Depot, runs like that.
Say that again?
Home Depot runs.
Yeah, exactly. Or anything, though. I mean, contractors now can accept credit card payments. So if you're doing like renos and stuff, they can accept it. Squares, I mean, all these merchants now accept construction, contractors. Yes. So contractors accept credit cards now. I mean, they get the money the next day. It's just as good as a check. Yeah. So you can literally do your repair, the cost of the repairs, and the actual construction in a lot of cases. Not all cases, because some of the contractors just don't have the interest in any kind of technology. But the reality is a good majority of them have adapted. It's the way of society. So you can normally cover all that. And then if you're doing a renovation, when you go to refinance it out, you're obviously paying the card off, plus you're refinancing out the existing loan to bottle it up into one. But we'll get into more about that. But it's just, I can't say enough that obviously the wrong thing to do is to buy a property on credit. First of all, you can't go to a settlement table and pay with a credit card. It just doesn't work like that. Anytime you purchase a property, you have to go through settlement, which ends at a title company, right? Different states require attorneys. Some don't require attorneys, but most don't. But either way, you have to go. Anybody that's bought a house understands you have to go to a settlement. The title company pulls the title on the property to check if there's any liens or encumbrances, to make sure that when you buy it, that mortgage company is set in first position and nobody's going to leapfrog them, right? They're in first position and there's nobody going to be in front of them. That's why they pull title, to make sure that there's no encumbrances that you're assuming. And if there is, then the seller needs to pay it off, and that there's not anything coming from you on that title search that could attach to that property. Okay. So once you get through settlement, I mean, settlement, they only accept money through certified check or a wire. That's it.
Yes.
Or wires, and that's it. I mean, you can't pay with a credit card. So even if you were trying to pay with a credit card, you'd have to take the cash off of it, which is most of credit cards, business, personal, etc. I mean, they charge an outlandish fee just to take cash off of it. In very, very, very few scenarios does that cash line even run the full limit. So if you have a $50,000 card, you might get 30% of that might be in cash, because the bank doesn't want to overexpose themselves to situations like that. So even in that instance, you wouldn't be able to do it. And I don't think a lot of people even understand that, right? I think they're so early in the process, they don't realize that even at the settlement table, you couldn't pay with a credit card, and it's just not that easy to take money off the card. I mean, yeah, sure, you can get an advance off. They'll give you a book of checks, or you can advance it to a bank account, but the difference is it's not going to be the full amount. And in most cases, the cash advance rate's like 25%. So now you just literally, yeah, it's insane.
But
it's
you
absurd.
Can't really take out the whole amount of money that is in the limit, correct?
And 85% of the time, no.
85%
I mean, there is. I don't want to sound like a moron and say 100%, because I know there's some instances when there is, but 85% of the time, no, you can't.
So if you have a $25,000 credit card, $20,000 credit card, more than likely you could take out on a cash advance $15,000.
I think that's high, probably on the average card. I think you're probably lower than that as far as cash. But anybody that has an online account can see it. It'll say it.
And
say,
then that comes
total
with
credit limit,
interest.
and then it'll say cash. It'll say credit limit. It doesn't matter the institution. It'll say credit limit and then cash available, or cash limit, depending on the. And it's normally a small, modicum of the much broader line. If it's a $20,000 line, an average scenario might be $5-7 grand. And and look, it gets tighter on the business side, by the way. On the business side,
but John, there's services out there that you could go through, and you have a $20,000 credit card, and you could go and charge $20,000, and that those people, for a fee, they give you money. You mentioned that the other day.
I don't think I mentioned it the other day. You talking about where somebody sets up their own merchant and you run your card to them to liquidate it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy though. I mean, how do you even validate that legally? Like, how could you protect yourself, right?
Well, John,
you run 20 grand. You run 20 grand on somebody else's merchant. They keep that 20 grand, and I mean, how are they even going to enforce that legally, right?
It's crazy.
Right? Think about that though. Like, if somebody said to you, "Yeah, I take merchant payments. You want to liquidate your car? Come at me." Right? So, All right, man. First of all, if you have a $20,000 card, I know we're hitting a little bit of a sidebar here, but support. If you have a $20,000 card and you go and run that 20 up, they're gonna freeze that charge. If you hit it on one run, they're gonna freeze it, especially if you had no activity before. And that doesn't matter to the bank, because they're gonna look at it like you're just trying to wax out this line and you're not gonna pay it back. I've seen that more times than I could possibly imagine. Many years ago, more so, because like modern day, the way we educate our clients, it's a completely different scenario, and they lean on us more for information. But going back 7, 8, 9 years, I mean, you would see people coming in and get 25,000 they try and take it all out. And they'd be like, why'd they freeze my card? Well, because you just got the card 2 days ago and you tried taking $24,000 out of it. I mean, you have no relationship with them, no history. They're going to think you're running a hustle, right? I mean, it's very understandable.
Correct.
I mean, what reason would you have to liquidate a credit card for $24,000 and 48 hours after you got it, right? So you see that all the time. But I mean, I think on a larger scale, I just think that people don't realize that the business cards are typically meant for expenses, right? They're meant, the purpose of that, they're not meant to be used for anything other. That's why you see the cash advance so much more, because most people take business cards for travel, it's for entertainment, it's for expenses, right? And then you tie it all back into the business, obviously QuickBooks, etc. It's not meant for people to live their lives through it, although it's an alternative way of utilizing it, right? Where they can start, you can divert debt from being on the personal account to move it over to the business side. If you do have a viable business, you can start to mix and match in certain areas where it applies and whatnot. And it helps keep the debt isolated and off the personal credit report. But for all intents and purposes, it's not meant for cash to be taken off of it, right?
Yeah.
That's why you have seen it hasn't really tightened up exponentially, and why it was a very viable scenario after 2008, 2009, when everything else tightened up, because businesses still need to be able to expense. I mean, we live in a credit-driven environment, especially on the business side. So I think, for people that want to do that and buy on that side, it's a completely different conversation. But without me going on too much of a blurb about that, I want to get into the real estate stuff. So, we wanted to kind of talk about, the different ways to walk into it. So we've talked previously about when you do identify a deal. We'll get into identifying a deal in a second. But, there's obviously 3 different ways you can do it. You can obviously pay cash for it. You can finance your whole scenario. Obviously, that's the cheapest. If you're experienced and you have background in it, I don't know if I agree with it, because I'm always about leveraging cash, because I'm just, I grew up in real estate and it's just the way it is. Real estate is heavy leverage and you leverage things, etc. So I don't know if I'd be going in paying cash, even with the experience I have, just because you could buy 4 or 5 properties for what it would cost you to tie up the liquidity in one property. But if you have the confidence you want to do it, you don't want to deal with a bank, that's an option. Now, for the rest, the other, for everybody else that's in the business, including people that are in the business regularly, financing is a large part of your growth. That's it. It's a capital intensive business, right? And it's a slow moving capital intensive business that requires leverage. So with that being said, you either can go to a traditional bank, which offers, now again, this isn't normal market and economic conditions. Right now, this is, chances are a lot of this stuff is not applying right now at this moment. Okay, it would have been applying in January. Chances are at some point in time in the future, it's going to reapply. But these, as far as the financing options, I don't think there's probably a lot of lenders right now doing renovation to perm loans. I just don't think there is. There's too much risk associated with it. And I think they've tailed back the risk. But just to give you a perspective,
you said renovation department?
Renovation to permanent loans. So what ends up happening is, if you could go to, in a lot of cases, we talked about this before. If
is
you're
that
developing
a 203K loan, Jay?
203K is FHA, and that's only on your primary residence. It's a different conversation. This is for investment, I think we're talking about. So the 203K is a renovation loan program through FHA, but it caps the amount of the renovation, and it's only for your personal residence. So for an investment type property, the 2 options that you have, like I said, is a traditional bank renovation to perm loan, which again is a very good option. I always push people towards it. And honestly, if you're in a city, it doesn't matter what city, most of the local city related lenders are in that business, because part of the prospectus behind them even getting the funding and the ability and the charter to be able to operate in that area was the idea that they're going to help them grow the community, right? So there are programs specifically catered to that in your local municipality. You're not going to get a lot of renter to perm loans from PNC Bank, from TD Bank, from Citi, from JP Morgan. They just don't do it because they make them. It's risk associated with it. They don't make any money on it, and they'd have to monitor it. And It's just not how they operate. So it's much more catered. That kind of a loan option is much more catered around the local lender, credit unions. But you're better off checking the local area for those, credit union savings and loans, etc., and see what they offer, because most of them offer. The alternative to that, if you can't line that up, would be obviously hard money or some sort of private money scenario. Obviously, we talked about this before when Carmelo was on, and times prior to that. Those rates tend to deviate on the very low end, which I think is unusually low, but as low as maybe 7.5%. They go. I mean, you sometimes see north of 15-16% on these loans, on the interest on these loans. Now, the difference with the hard money loans is they'll bang you on points, right? So you get banged on points and fees. You're not going to get that when you're dealing with a credit union or savings and loan, et cetera, that's local to the area, because it's just not. They're making their money on the interest. They're not making their money on gouging consumers. So, the private or hard money lender is a little different though. They're gonna get you for 7.5 to, like I said, 15-16%. Most of them are gonna charge anywhere on average. Now, granted, this can be a higher number, it can be a lower number. I'm giving an average anywhere from 2 to 4 points. Points mean the total loan amount that you're borrowing times by that number. So, for instance, if your purchase price is $50,000 and you're doing, by the time all the draws on the renovation are done, $50,000 in renovation, your total loan amount will be, when that's done, $100,000. When you hear that a hard money lender charges 2 or 3 points, that's 2 or 3% of that total amount. So if you borrow $100,000, or the total loan once fully extended is $100,000, that means just in the points you're going to pay 2 to 3% or $2,000 to $3,000, totally outside of all the other fees and title costs that you have to pay. On $100,000, it doesn't sound that crazy, right? 2 to 3 grand, right? If it's 2 to 3 points, but get up to $1 million. Oh, talking 20, 30 grand. Just in those points, right? Outside of the other fees they'll charge, because they'll charge other fees depending on how unscrupulous the particular hard money lender is, right? Yes. And they'll bang in all these other ridiculous fees. So the points are one thing, but it's a really an accumulating cost that can. If you think about the average closing on a primary residence going through traditional bank, with your title fees and your transfer tax and all the other traditional fees, the average amount of closing costs typically equates to anywhere from 4 to 5% of the total loan amount. Okay, so if you think in your head, and that's without points. So if you think in your head that they're adding another 2 to 3 points on top of it, plus any fees, et cetera, that number can be somewhere in the 8 to 9% of the total loan amount, which is insane, right? Yes. But this is just part of borrowing from hard money lender. There are means to an end. There's a low-hanging fruit, and it's an option. Now, the way they arrive at, and the other thing about, just to be clear, the other thing, just to go back, because I didn't cover this before, a renovation to perm loan with a credit union or an institution typically requires, they're going to full doc the loan. They're going to make sure that you make money. They're going to make sure that you are worthy of the risk that they're going to be taking. The interest rates typically range from about 75 basis points over prime to 80, 85 basis points over prime. So if you're telling me right now, I think I looked yesterday at a conversation with a client, the 30-year, at least per Wells, was about 3.25. You're paying about 4% on that. In a normal environment, you're going to pay 4% on that renovation to perm loan with a traditional credit union or savings loan, as opposed to what we just talked about, as high as potentially 15%. You're not going to have the fees. You're not going to have the points. And the cool thing is that in a renovation to perm loan, the way the bank protects themselves is they basically build an interest reserve. The interest reserve technically applies to, they're going to set aside money at closing to cover your payments for the first leg of the loan. So maybe 6 months, they'll put an interest reserve together. So you're not even making payments. They're applying it to the principal amount of the overall loan. So you're not encumbered by that additional debt, because they want the deal to work, right? Like I said, they're not gouging you on points. They don't want to take the property back. They want it to be successful. They want it to work. It's obviously the best possible option there is out there. But, the loan to values are almost identical. So, for instance, for anybody that doesn't understand loan to value is effectively the value of the property against what you're borrowing. So if you're borrowing $100,000 and the total loan amount that you're trying to get is $50,000, that's effectively 50% loan to value, right? That's how they arrive at it. Now, if you're doing a construction to perm loan, they work off of an ARV, which is an after repair value, which whether it's a private money lender or a savings and loan and credit union, they're all going to get an appraisal done, where you have to provide them what you're going to do to the property, and they're going to find the properties in that particular neighborhood that would equate to the work that you're trying to do. Now they're going to attach an ARV to it. So for argument's sake, let's use the scenario we're talking about. So this conversation started the Milwaukee property for $50,000. Let's just say they're doing a renovation to perm loan on that, and when it's all said and done, appraiser determines it's worth $150,000. Well, this applies to both types of lenders. They're typically going to lend. Again, it's going to deviate on the risk, but let's just, for argument's sake, conservatively just leave it around 65%. Actually, let's just do round numbers and do 60%. They're going to do 60% of the ARV, right? This is a conservative number. Some go higher, but just for the sake of simplicity. Okay. So effectively, what they're going to do is they're going to lend you 60% of 150, because that's the ARV, which means after repair value. Correct. So if you're buying it for 50, then that would theoretically, if 150 times 60% is $90,000, and you're buying it for 50, that would theoretically leave you $40,000 for the renovation, right? Correct. Yes. So in situations like that, they'll normally break the renovation out into draws. However you break the draws down for that particular situation. Let's say you have 4 draws all evenly split out between the work that you're doing. Normally, the lender will have you do the work first, and they'll reimburse you after they have an inspector come out. You do the work, that you outlined to the degree that you outlined it, and then they'll have an independent inspector come out, review it, then they'll release you that draw, right? And that's how it effectively works over the course of the project. Like I said before, the good thing about one of the many good things about dealing with a traditional lender like a savings loan or a credit union is that that interest cost that you're accumulating with the hard money lender is effectively built into the loan, but it's only at 4% anyway. So you're only paying on what you're borrowing. So for instance, if you settle at the settlement table, you borrow 50, that first month at 4%, you're paying, $200. So in situations like that, you're only going, as the loan amount increases, that's when they increase the rent, they increase the amount of the payment, but there's going to be an interest reserve that's already going to be set up for you. When it comes to the hard money lenders, unfortunately, that's not the case. Okay. And you're immediately paying on that interest. You're paying that interest every month, and that doesn't matter. Normally, the hard money lenders, and same with the savings and loans or credit unions, they typically have a term on it, but there's a lot more flexibility when it comes to the bank, because the bank can just renew it, and they're not going to hit you for all these atrocious fees. Typically, if you have to go back to a private money lender or a hard money lender, they're going to hit you for a 1-2% renewal fee. Like I said, when you're working from $50,000 to $100,000 number, it doesn't sound that large, right? It doesn't sound crazy large when you hear 1 or 2%. The problem is those 1 or 2% are everywhere in a private money deal. They're at the points, they're at a renewal, they're this, they're that. And on a $100,000 deal, using that scenario, you're trying to sell for $150,000, and you're trying to potentially, after you pay the real estate agent, which is 6%, both sides, right? And after you accumulate all the interest you paid over the course of the loan, depending on how long it took you. I mean, you're trying to target, in theory, a 20% return if you can in a good market. So on $150,000, you're trying to make $30,000, right? Yes. Well, I mean, you're talking about a situation where everything legitimately, like, the interest alone is going to be on a $100,000 loan at, say, 12%. You're talking $1,200 a month. That goes 6 months at $7,200. Plus the points we just talked about, 3% on $100,000. You're talking another $3,000. That's $11,000 now. I mean, it adds up. Wow. It adds up quick. You have to pay 6% to the realtor on the back end, plus transfer tax. So plus, you know what I mean? That's 8% roughly off of 150 if you sold it for that. That brings it down to 130 plus the other. I mean, you really start knocking down when you put pen to paper, and these are things that you got to take into consideration when you start adding these things up. At the end, even if you did everything right on the renovation, which is difficult to do, I mean, it's difficult because there's a lot of unexpected stuff. It's a little more predictable on new construction. On renovations, it's not. And in situations like that, once you get to the end of it, if you hit everything right on, you look and you see yourself, damn, situations when you're dealing with hard money lenders where a consumer could walk away making $12,000-15,000 and the lender made more than that. Yes. Like real talk. I mean, that's insane. And they hit all their marks, right? And the lender somehow made more money between the points, the interest, extension, etc., and the fees that they charged throughout than the actual borrower did. So, I understand it for typically private money loans, there's no documentation is required. The lender is an asset lender at that point. And I'm not here to crap on private money lenders. I'm really not. I'm just trying to give a consumer the understanding so they know what they walk themselves into, and what to expect. Because I feel like situations when I've had conversations with customers that have gotten into projects, the one constant that I hear is not only the renovation side, which, it's understandable if you have no background in construction to get completely absorbed by the renovation side, right? It takes some time to find a team. It takes some time to find trustworthy people. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of the business. You just hope that whatever lumps you take early on aren't too big, right? But then the other thing you find out
when they do the math, a lot of people end up doing things themselves, Jay.
No, they do, for sure. And I think the natural understanding is that a contractor, it's an easy segue for them to get into the business. The problem is the contractor knows how to use their hands. They don't understand the financing side. So you see it two ways. You understand what I mean?
Yes.
Unless you're some sort of a hybrid and you understand both sides, which happens all the time, it's either a binary situation where somebody understands the finance side, they don't understand the construction side. Or they understand, they come in being a contractor, they get the construction side, they don't have a clue about the financing side. Yeah. And so you see them when they look at the first deal they sell, and they're like, man, how did the lender make more? And then they start to put this together in their head, and they're like, well, maybe I could have saved on the renter. No, you couldn't. You couldn't. And that's not where you want to be cutting, right? You don't want to be cutting on the renovation because then you're potentially chinching on the product, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't do that in any other product you're trying to sell. Why would you do that on a property? So, especially if people are going to be living there, right? But, you know, the way that, just to take it a step further to kind of bring it back for a second, you know, the way that appraisers arrive at values are called comparables. A comparable is, they call them comps, which are effectively, you know, properties that are, you know, fit the same square footage of the property you have, whether it's through the ARV or the true, you know, primary residence purchase or refinance. It's basically comparable sales in the immediate area. If it's on a block in any given city, it's going to be houses on the block. They don't need to deviate. They're typically used within the last 6 months. If it's a very dense, a sparsely populated place, they'll go out a little bit further, but most inner cities, you'll get the comps right on the block, which makes it very easy. If you're in a neighborhood, chances are it's going to come right from your neighbors. The houses that are similar to yours with similar finishes and similar attributes, and where you're better than that house, you get perks based on the appraisal, and where you're inferior to those houses, they make deductions and they arrive at a price, right? And that's the number that they use when they're determining the loan to values on these investment products. And just this works for regular houses too, though. If you're just buying a primary house or you're refinancing a primary residence, that's how they're going to arrive at that value. They're literally just going to take closed sales within the last 6 months in most cases. A lot of times they try to keep it tighter than that, but I mean, they'll go out 6 months in order to be able to establish that value. And that value is the first thing that you need to kind of identify to see if that deal works, right?
That's the first thing, like get in contact with a realtor and say, I like that house. What are the comps around the area?
Well, you know, the good thing is, again, I do my best to try and sway people from, because it's just, I just think people would be far better off understanding. I think people would be far better off understanding all this on themselves. Now, I'm not saying Zillow values are good, because I don't think they are. I think they deviate. I think they're general blended values that exist in certain areas. But if you don't want to call an agent, you can always, you know, go through Zillow and get somewhat of a reasonable value. It's going to be off, right? Okay. It's going to be off, but it's going to give you some semblance of an idea of what the general area is operating out on a value level. And then you can start backing into numbers, right? I mean, if it's a deal, you'll be able to do the numbers, and you got to back in off those loan to values we're talking about. Most private money lenders or savings and loans, they're going to want like 10% down in a lot of cases. Some of them, which is crazy, but I don't even know if these ones ever really materialize, but sometimes you see hard money lenders, larger ones, nationwide ones, which you just don't know how they actually maneuver, where they'll finance 100% of it and roll it all in. But that's not going to be sustainable for the borrower. It's another example of where, you know, the lender's making way more than the borrower, right? And they know at the end of the day, they're ultimately, because the deal's so conservatively levered relative to the ARV, that if they got to take the property back, they will, right? And a lot of hard money lenders will do a deed in lieu of foreclosure. If you're not familiar with that, that basically allows them the opportunity to bypass having to foreclose on you. They record the deed. They record the deed in court after you go in default and violate the original mortgage agreements, which allows them to go back and capture the property.
Yes.
So understand that it's not the same process. It's a much more aggressive, much more accelerated. I'm not saying all of them will take the property from you right away or go. You know, some states are different. Some states make you fight a little harder, but a lot of them do the deed in lieu of foreclosure to help bypass how long it takes to actually foreclose on somebody. When you go through a traditional bank, you obviously don't have that same problem. When I say traditional bank, like I mean earlier, I'm talking about a savings loan. You don't have the same problem. Now, again, private money lenders and hard money can be a means to an end, right? So if you're not able to document your income, you don't have that luxury, just know what to expect. That's all. That's all we're trying to say. I'm not here to say that a private money lender is at 8%, if you can find one, that charges you 1 point and doesn't charge you extension fees and doesn't hit you for all these BS nonsense fees, is a bad deal, because I don't think it is. You don't have to document income and you get the same loan to value you can get other places. That's fine. It's just finding something like that is like finding a diamond in your front yard, right? It's just not common, and it's not something that's standard, but they do exist. And typically speaking, if it's a private individual, sometimes you can get them to do it because they're just trying to get return on their investment, right? They believe in you as a human being. And your ability to perform from a lending perspective. And obviously these lenders get a lot of peace of mind because they have a piece of collateral, which is their worst case scenario, right?
But I see some investors, they come in with an equation to see how much money they're going to make. They come with like a rough estimate of an equation on the return on investment. Is there like a number that they go by or you go by when you go in and try and analyze it?
See, I'm good on the construction side of things. So normally speaking, on a renovation, I typically, if I got to gut the place, it's typically about $55 a square foot. So if you're gutting a 1,000 square foot house and rebuilding it from the inside with the shell outside, it's, you're talking about 55,000 would be the number that would be expected. Now I'm talking taking literally down to the walls and then like going back up.
What they call a gut out.
Yeah, it's a gut. Yeah, so you're gutting it. So, but a new construction, typically, on average, depending if it's an apartment building or a new construction single, I can normally do new construction, depending on the area, anywhere from 80 on a single family, probably about 75, $80 a square. And obviously the multifamilies, because you get into sprinkler systems and specified alarm systems, and there's certain caveats that go into apartment buildings. But that can be somewhere in the high 90s, somewhere around there, which is actually really cheap relative to what a lot of other people would pay. But that there's no general formula you can do for that. The reason I can come up with that is because I use the same contractors I've used forever, right? I know what their prices are, and I know what to do. For somebody else that's a newbie coming into this, that would be impossible. You know what I mean? It would be absolutely impossible for them to utilize anything like that, because it's going to take them some time to get comfortable with numbers. It's going to take them some time to be able to determine what their contractors are paying, because most contractors, it's a free marketplace, right? I mean, if you don't know what the typical number is on a contractor, they're going to try and get the most amount of money they can out of the situation, right? So if you come in, that's why you see when people get a deck put, they go through, what's one of those sites where you hire somebody to put a deck on, right? Where you put in
Angie's List.
Okay, good example. Angie's List. You go on Angie's List and you tell a contractor you want to get a deck done. The guy comes out, he sees it's a single family house, and then the family looks nice. The people, they get a bid for like $6,000.
Yeah.
That same deck cost me $1,500 with the wood and the installation, right? So it's like, it's stuff like that. You need to be able to know your numbers in order to be able to get them down, because if you know what their cost is, then you know what they're making, right? If you know what it costs the material cost on that deck, which you eventually figure out, right?
Yeah.
You eventually figure out, because wood is a commodity, it fluctuates. So a lot of the building materials are commodities that go up and down with other commodities, right? I mean, they typically tend to move in similar directions. So when you're able to identify what those costs are, you're able to kind of get in their pocket a little bit. The more you know about what they're making, the more you have to negotiate, right? Because everybody wants to do business. It's just being able to get it at the price that's right. And it takes time to get to that number, right? That's why I'm always trying to implore people to learn all this stuff on their own, because to me, it's an ignorant position to just sit back and get taken advantage of. And I'm not saying a free market get taken advantage of. I'm just saying that if you know somebody's hitting you over the head at $5,000 when you know that you could probably get the number down to, a couple thousand in all reality and still make out, then that's your own fault, right? I mean, theoretically, that's your own fault. You're just being lazy and you're eating a couple $1,000 when more than likely. And that doesn't mean going to the cheap guy that's posting on Craigslist either. That just means knowing how to communicate with people and get the number down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you know what you're talking about in anything, people respect you.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if you're talking about sports. It doesn't matter if you're talking about sneakers. It doesn't matter if you're talking about stocks. If you know what you're talking about, people recognize as real. That term came from somewhere, right? People understand when you're coming from a place of sincerity and when you're just some smoke job, right?
Correct.
So if you are able to sharpen your pencil and do your job right, you can really get comfortable with the renovation side of things. That can be a huge attribute in the real estate investing business, right? If you know where cost is and you get real good at it, and you get real good contractors over the course of time, and you can get them to buy in because you're doing project after project after project, and you're just giving them residual regular income, right, and jobs, and not just letting them think it's a one job, one and off, and they're going to get over on you, they're not going to hear from you again. Yeah. Trust me, it can be a very, very, very profitable situation because at that point, everybody's making money, everybody's happy, right? And you're keeping your numbers down, and it allows you the opportunity to be able to make more money on each deal. They're happy because they keep getting more and more deals to do, right? So it becomes a win-win for everybody. Can a contractor
smell someone who's a newbie and overcharge them?
Well, bad breath, dude. Of course they can smell. Yes, without a doubt. I mean, it's they smell from a mile away. But this is why I'm saying that it's important for people not to just turn on HGTV and watch all these absurd television shows and how they try to project this ease of transition into this kind of a line of business. I'm not saying you couldn't walk blindly into this and make money. You probably could, and you get very, very lucky. But it's not going to happen every time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if you got the time and you want to get into it, why not just be good get good at all the things that make it good? Like important. Everybody thinks real estate's so easy because of the fact that all you got to do is be able to identify deals and reference it based on the comps, right? So, I mean, and to a certain degree, that is a large part of it. But if you're actually going in with the idea of making a living on it, and you're going to renovate, and you're going to sell these, and you can keep some as rentals and stuff, you need to get good at your craft, you know? Like, and that craft, when it comes to real estate, there's only a couple different areas that you really need to focus on and take into consideration. Obviously, it's the construction side. Obviously, it's lining up your capital. And obviously, if you don't get a renovation to perm loan like you would with a savings loan or credit union, that you need to find exit financing, right? And if you're renting it, a tenant or a buyer on the sales side. So, you know, it ends up being a situation that it just, you know, it can be something if you know what to walk in for and you know what to expect, that you can really prepare well for it. You know, I mean, the real estate market is totally different than the stock market. I'm not saying you can't prepare for the stock market, but there's always a certain level of uncertainty that you can't say with 100% surety about something in the stock market, right? Because anything could happen overnight. The value of your property overnight is not going to drop 20%, right? It doesn't happen overnight like that. It doesn't move that quickly. You could theoretically see a stock drop. I mean, we saw that the market moved 35% in 5 weeks, right? Overnight, it might have dropped 9-10%. That happens, but not with the real estate market. So if you're smart about it, you learn to be conservative about it, you understand every part of the game, I mean, you can really position yourself well, and you don't have to chase deals. I mean, I think the one thing, we talked about this previously, that's gone on over the market, in all theory, was ready to correct in 2016. That was when the market was ready to correct. You were starting to see a broader correction, and you were starting to see things start to, you know, pull back in a lot of major cities, and you started to see housing.
There's a lot of people, realtors, on my Facebook posting COVID-19 sale. I went over $20,000 the asking price. Bunch of those.
Right. So I don't know if you saw last week, year over year, real estate sales are down 27%. That's year over year, and that's in large part because the first quarter was lost. Now, those people that are telling you that they sold this and they sold that, I don't doubt it. But we deal as a nation, right? And when you hear 27% down year over year, housing starts were abysmal. And housing starts means new construction coming out, right? Real estate, remember what I say this every single time. The stock market moves like a motorcycle. The real estate market moves like an aircraft carrier. It takes time. When you're hearing that the market was down 27% year over year, this was last week. And that was for March's data. That wasn't even for April. April is going to be a smack in the face, and it's only going to get more profound. Now, I do believe that there's, like I said before, there's good agents. There's good agents. People of overall agents are just good at what they do. So I don't doubt that somebody has the ability to sell a house. I also don't doubt the fact that same person that just sold that house probably got it under contract before all this happened, has been shitting themselves for the last 6 weeks deciding if they were going to buy it. They finally committed and said, fuck it, because of the fact that they convinced themselves they're going to live in that the rest of their lives, right?
Yeah.
I know just as many of those deals that went through completely fell apart. And this isn't just on the real estate side. This is businesses buying businesses. This is Wall Street related stuff where people have walked out of deals because of the massive amount of uncertainty that exists.
Well, you got Warren Buffett coming out of the airplane. He sold out all the airplane stock.
I've been talking about the airplanes going back 3 casts, right? I said, what are they going to do? That's the one I've been saying. You said I was a germaphobe. I'm like, I'm not a germaphobe. This is just reality. Like, what do you, when you're in an environment that is so, that is so aware and so conscious of germs and viruses and such, like, how are you going to put him on an airplane that was already a disgusting experience? And it just goes to show you, when you see him, he executed every one of the major airlines he got out of. He didn't even keep one. And he is a long-term investor. So that should just tell you how little faith he has. You're talking about a guy that's successfully invested forever.
Yeah. How
little faith he has in this market recovering anytime soon to any reasonable lengths, right? And that is concerning. I mean, I think that's why you saw the market sell off yesterday at the open, or when the futures opened, and into this morning. Because when you hear somebody like that, who at the bottom of 08 saying buy, right? When everybody was, completely, it was just a different environment then. But at the bottom, he was encouraging people to buy, and you hear him do his annual meeting, and he was much more somber about it. It was a totally different situation, and it's not a good read through if you're an investor, right? But without getting off topic, I do think that it and I've been consistent about this. It's going to take some time for things to slow down. I mean, I know that I know one of our clients had a dealership that, car sales have slowed down. If you look at car sale numbers, they're ridiculous. We talked about this before. Right now, as of March, that's not going into April, but as of March, car sales were equivalent to 2012. Talking about 7 years ago, when the market was at a bottom, and that was the production they had in car sales in March. So imagine what April was, the first full month of home confinement, when nobody did anything. When those numbers come out, people's heads are going to spin, because they're going to be so bad because nobody left the house. I mean, literally, no one left the house. So anybody can sit. But one of the clients we have that works at a dealership, he said that they sold I talked to him maybe 2 weeks ago, and he had told me that they sold maybe 30 cars in a weekend, which I thought was great news, right? Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's indicative of probably a lot that they were offering as far as the promotional stuff, but you still had people out there, which is great. So it gives the economy a pulse, right? It's giving it a pulse. It means not everybody's hiding in their closets, right? And with masks and helmets on. But I don't know if that's a carry through, right? I don't know I don't know what a regular weekend for them was. But to even hear then, when he told me that they sold, I think it was 30 that weekend, that's a big weekend, considering all the other variables. So
yes, look, that's a lot of bell ringing.
It's a lot of bell ringing, and I think they're like a Subaru dealer too. So, I think it was like Subaru, maybe Kia, something like that. It's irrelevant. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, that's a good sign too. I think good signs are great. I certainly don't want to see the economy do anything other than prosper. But I just think that's the reality of it, is the fact that, it's going to unwind, as I've been always saying. It's going to be everything I've said since the beginning. I mean, unfortunately, this is just typical market reactions to situations like this, especially a situation like this that is just still so uncertain. People are seeing now. You're seeing the fact that, people are opening economies back up in certain states, and people still aren't leaving. They're still not coming out of their house because they don't have to. They don't have to go to work.
Correct. But there's still, I mean, we get kind of like a broader perspective on it, only because we get customers from all 50 states.
Yeah.
So we're seeing, someone else in Arizona, Texas, Illinois, that they're trying to get their credit because they're trying to get something good for themselves that they're going to make money on. So if people stay stuck, like, oh man, things are bad, sometimes people themselves are doing bad, but that doesn't necessarily mean that someone else on another side of the country is not doing good.
No, but I think, and this is the one thing I said before too, is that I think the one constant that I'm seeing with a lot of new clients that are starting is that, and I don't know if this is a coincidence, because I know we talked about in a couple of previous podcasts about doing this, or if it's just on their own, but a lot of people are saying, I want to position myself, which I think is awesome. Yes. I think it's great, because you didn't see, people weren't prepared in 08 for 08, right? Correct. So now you have people that weren't over leveraged coming into this. Now there was people over leveraged. I'm speaking broadly now, but there wasn't nearly as many people over leveraged coming into this as there was in 08. I'd say a large majority of the people when 06, 07, 08 came about were largely caught off sides, right? And this stuff people that were investing in real estate back then had no business investing in real estate, and they were borrowed up to the hill. You could do an investment property at 95% loan to value back then. So when the market tanked and the banks pulled back their loan to values, nobody could get out. They were stuck in these properties. right? Nobody was going to finance you at that point. So all these people got stuck with foreclosures and things like that. And it just turned into just a domino effect of unwinding. But it was an unwinding that took a long time. But it took so long because the asset that was most at risk was the houses. And it takes a long time to foreclose on a house, right?
Yes.
So it took a long time for the real estate market to really find a strong footing and really start to grow back up. In this particular case, you're talking about businesses, right? I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I didn't even realize this, that in like resort areas, you know, where you may have Airbnbs and stuff, short points, etc. They literally, even though the beaches are closed, so they've literally cut off their effective lifeline, right, by cutting off the beaches. But not only did they do that, but they said you can't rent anywhere. So even if somebody wants to come to Point Pleasant, New Jersey, right, in April, you can't come in April because we're literally not allowing you to rent your place. How crazy is that?
Yes.
I mean, you start saying to yourself, how can you control who I'm renting a property to? Why would, if you can't go to the beach and the person wants to sit in the den in Indian style and meditate for 3 months, why can't they do that? Why can't you rent your property out? Why would there be a rent moratorium for resort areas? It doesn't make any sense to me. You know, when you hear stuff like that, you realize that there's all these different striations of the economy that are impacted by this exponentially that the media doesn't even talk about, and that you don't even realize until you look there, right? Like the Airbnb market is torched. There was an entire economy of people that were making a good living on Airbnb. It's toast.
Oh, yes.
Toast. There was people that were renting properties and then re-renting them through Airbnb. So think about that. Let's just say you had a rental property. Some guy comes in and says, listen, I want to rent your property for the year.
Yeah.
Whether they tell you or don't tell you is a different conversation. I don't know the rules around that. But then they turn around and Airbnb it. And they take all the money, their money over whatever they could collect over and above the agreed upon rent they had with the landlord. But think about this. In that situation, the guy who's running it, the hustler, right, who's re-Airbnb-ing it, is effed, right? Because he now can't operate. And then the guy that thought he was renting to a normal person, if he's not notified, isn't getting his payment. So now you got two different businesses in one property that are impacted directly. That's everywhere. It's everywhere. That's what I'm saying. Like stuff like this, people don't even realize, and it's still not out of it yet, right? They're just leaking in like opening beaches and stuff. So that's why I'm saying when we talk about this real estate stuff, there will absolutely be an opportunity. And I think every one of the clients that started, whether you start with us or you're just trying to make that effort to position yourself, I think it'll be rewarded, right? I really do. There's going to be a lot of opportunity. It's just be patient. I can't say it enough. Be patient. You know, that guy that's on Facebook right now bragging about overselling selling a property 20 G's or 20% or whatever the number was over market. Unfortunately, there's a really large probability that person that just bought the property $20,000 over market is not going to be in a very comfortable position in the next 12 to 18 months, right? Especially if the leverage on that loan was high.
Yes.
So as much as one person's, you know, jumping around having a great time about it, if the pain threshold for that buyer is not high, there's a good possibility they could be very uncomfortable in a short period of time if they finance that to the roof. So I just think it's important, like I always say, is just to have all the knowledge. If you have all the knowledge, you can make the decision. If you make the wrong decision with all the knowledge because of emotion or because of any number of variables that are outside of just binary facts, then that's your fault because you had all the information you needed to make that decision and you screwed it up. But I think the thing we try to do with this is just to properly educate people so they understand it, and then they can make that decision. I can't make a decision for you. I could tell you what you need to do to make the right decision. I can steer you in the right direction, but I couldn't tell you the amount of times I've done that for people, and they go with their gut and they're wrong, and they end up shooting themselves in the foot. So, I mean, we're just trying to make sure that a lot of these areas that are surrounded by question marks can not become question marks anymore, right? So when that person does want to go and do it, whether it's a client of ours or not that's listening, and they want to go and do it, at least they know what questions to ask, right? Yes. And they know how to arrive at it, and they're much more knowledgeable on the subject matter, so that they don't look like a noob, like you were talking about before. They don't get taken advantage of in any financing situation, or if they are, they at least know it. And they're like, you know what, it's a means to an end right now, but I'm going to get out of it like this, right? And it's a real plan, not like, I'm going to figure this, you know what I mean? Like it's a real, like justifiable scenario where if you're borrowing money at an unsustainable rate, you're going to beat the unsustainable rate by getting out of it quickly, right? Because that's the only way you can really beat hard money when you're borrowing from them. The only way you can really beat it is to get in and out. The only way to get in and out of a deal is to be organized. The only way to be organized is to plan. And in order to plan, you got to be good at what you do. So as a result of that, I mean, if you have all the knowledge, it obviously helps to accelerate the ability to be taken advantage of, at least on the financing side.
Wow. Amazing. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you sound off. So we have some people here who on Facebook and on YouTube asking questions. Let me see. You remember Eric Nettles? I think we did a podcast with Eric Nettles.
Yeah, of course we did.
Yeah. He was one of our first and second podcasts. Gizzy and John and Gizzy are truly the truth. You have to be patient because they will get it done. Trust them. They are very knowledgeable and truly care for their customers. Even if we scream at you with knowledge and hit you over the head with knowledge, is all for your good, for good intentions. All right. Let me see what else. This is Maurice from Atlanta. Mark Watson. Maurice says, thanks for having this. We needed the extra to fully grasp your individual angle of doing credit repair. Okay, great. Andrew's there. Carol's there. And Andrew just asked, do you guys have a step-by-step plan to create real estate wealth for beginners? No, Andrew.
No, because I think the important thing, and this is why you see more, like for instance, Carmelo, a guy we had on earlier, he teaches, he kind of does his own situation similar, which he educates and he actually teaches. It's important to actually be hands-on.
Correct.
With people that you're trying to show for the reasons that we were describing earlier about the potential you can run into on the contractor side, how you can get taken advantage of on the funding side, and all these areas that if you want to be able to mitigate that learning curve or maybe avoid the pain of that learning curve, somebody that knows what they're doing can help to alleviate that, right? For all the reasons we're trying to educate you so you can teach yourself, sometimes, having somebody there, if you are going to get into a program, can help.
Carmelo teaches, and he has a very cheap program, affordable program, not cheap because he knows what he's talking about. He's helped a lot of people get into real estate investing.
Yeah, but I think reading in the book, look, you can learn a lot through somebody explaining it to you and stuff like that. I think the difference between reading in a book and us talking about it now, or if we did a week's worth of this, I think you'd be able to understand it a lot better because we're giving scenarios that are help driving it with it and tying it all together, right? When you read it in a book, it's not necessarily depending on the level of the reading comprehension of the individual and how good they are, that sometimes people can get confused even further. And when you hear it, and you hear it broken down into examples, sometimes that can make it a little easier to understand. But to answer the original question, no, unfortunately, not at this particular point in time.
Okay. All right. On YouTube, well, is there an Sandy Baby 312 said, well, is there an upside to purchasing a property 45 to 60,000 on credit card?
No, there's no upside under any circumstance. There wouldn't even be an upside if your intention was to turn around. Well, number one, we already talked about the fact you can't do it. It's not viable. In order to settle, you have to have you can only purchase a property through a title company. You can only pay a title company with a certified check or with a wire. So, you can't even pay with the credit. You'd have to take the money off the credit card. And then you'd have to pay the cash advance fee, which is like 25% in most cases. And in a lot of cases, you don't get the full amount. So there's not ever a situation where that would make even a modicum of sense. But I think it's an easy sell. If you're somebody selling business credit, it's a very easy sell on somebody, on an unsuspecting mind, right? Like, yeah, we'll get you all this business credit. We'll open up a business. We use business credit. Won't be on your personal credit. We'll raise you all this money. By the time they realize it's credit cards, which they normally don't know in the early going, then they get it in credit cards, whatever they're able to get, if they're able to get anything. And then they realize that they can't even take cash off of it because there's no cash advance on the particular card. So in situations like that, there's not really ever an instance under any circumstance where you could massage it where purchasing it would be the correct option or even a viable option, given all the variables I just discussed. So no, there's not ever. A credit line is different, by the way. A credit line and a credit card are two totally different things. I explained earlier in this, they're amortized differently. Credit lines are completely liquid. Obviously you're not getting hit for advance fees and so on and so forth. The amortizations are longer. There's different borrowing costs. It's totally different. But you're talking about credit cards, not ever. on the purchase.
That's the big brother in life asked, can you use business credit for real estate purchases?
I mean, you can use, I mean, the ideal situation, the appropriate situation would be for any property you purchase, if the objective is to buy and sell it or even maintain it and rent it, you should be setting up LLCs for every one of these for the protection and liability protection it provides, and to isolate the debt in each one. Now, if you're going to have like a management company that you take your salary from that's outside of these LLCs, and these LLCs trickle back to that management company, you want to open in the management company, that you could do that, right? But there's still not ever a situation where paying with a credit card makes any sense. So if you're saying business credit, maybe for the purpose, like I was saying earlier,
correct,
opening a business credit in the name of the management company to cover the renovations for a property or to pay the contractors if they take credit cards, stuff like that, sure, yeah, that makes sense. And obviously you're isolating the debt and you're taking it off your personal credit, and you start to get a little more strategic in situations like that, right? But I mean, there's a real process there. Like, you can really, really, really do yourself a favor by properly setting up this property. It doesn't cost a lot of money to do it yourself. It isolates the debt. And again, like I said before, you have a management company, which is effectively the parent company, and all the profits from the properties can report back to that, trickle back like a parent and a subsidiary. So it all reports together. So, I mean, to answer the original question, yes, but in the aspect I just described, not in any other way, because there's no other viable way to do it. So, I mean, if you had let me just back up, because I just want to be thorough, because everybody's picky. If you have a business line of credit, again, credit line of credit, not credit card, line of credit, then yeah, sure. But again, it needs to be important that you do it under an organized scenario. Otherwise, you're going to lose the tax write-off, because you get to write off the interest of these borrowings, right? Like, if it's a business expense, you get to write it off. So let's just say, for instance, you do all your renovations, through credit cards and stuff, and you pay them off, but you ride them until you're done the job. And at the end of the year, you have $12,000 in interest expense. You can write that off on the business side. If you have it staggered around in other businesses and it's not all isolated, you're not going to be able to draw against. It's not going to tie back, because you're limited in the amount of loss you can show when it comes back to your personal income tax. So it would have to be tied together to offset the income from that particular entity. So there's a right and a wrong way to do everything, right? And I think, on a lot of these obvious, YouTube, Facebook, etc., they do like very basic vanilla explanations, right? And that's what people get attached to. The problem with that, though, is that it can be manipulated in so many different ways, right? Especially if somebody's trying to make money off you as a result of it. So it can be so confused and convoluted for the individual that really wants to get into it. They just don't know. This is why I wanted to specifically talk today about you can't buy a property on a credit card. I couldn't tell you the amount of people that have asked me that. They're only asking me that because they watched it on a video somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somebody said it, because I've been hearing that for 5 years. So, I mean, if you're talking about a situation, I've heard about it for 5 years. It's been percolating for 5 years, and it still gets percolated. And obviously, whoever's pushing that obviously doesn't understand real estate either, which is even more dangerous, right? That you're telling somebody they can buy a property on a credit card. So, I mean, it's stuff like this. It's why we do these things, because just such blatant, like, easily deniable information, right? Like, I mean, anybody that would be in the business, be like, I mean, if you remember when we had Carmelo on, first thing I said, Carmelo, one of the first questions I asked, can you first and foremost, basically explain that, buying a property on a credit card is not a good idea. And his first response was, well, you can't even buy a property on a credit card, because this is the first answer. There's no way to do it. They don't have like a merchant at the title company. I mean, it's not a possibility, just in very binary terms. So, I mean, even beyond everything else I'm talking about. So, no, unfortunately, to answer the original question again, yes, in a proper way, business credit can help you on the real estate side, if you're doing it properly and you're set up the right way. Otherwise, you're going to be. Let me give you an example. And Gizzy, I hope you don't mind me explaining this example, but this is a really, really, really good example.
Okay.
Gizzy set up his company. Somebody helped him set his company up, right? In a certain way and we're not going to use names, and then in a way that they projected was the proper way to set it up, right? Yeah. And then he and I went over it one time, and literally everything. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Gizzy. I think everything was wrong. Was everything wrong in the setup, or was there
I didn't even have the articles of incorporation.
You didn't have anything.
Yeah.
You didn't even have your right name on the certificate of organization. You had Gizzy. He put your name Gizzy as in the certificate of organization for the business. You had Gizzy, so you couldn't go and open up another bank account at another bank because your name is Guillermo.
Correct.
So I mean, you talk about stuff, and this guy. Again, I'm not going to use anybody's names, but this particular individual has been selling business-related stuff, and he's got a whole motif about it. And you say to yourself, if this is one client that I'm watching, I can't even imagine. And this is just, and I don't want to get into too much. I'm just saying that you got to really be careful out there, people, about who you align yourself with, and really know what you're talking about in order to get in, especially if you're going to spend real money, because a lot of this stuff is sales. I mean, especially it's all sales, man. I mean, it really is. If you can tell people that know what they're talking about. I mean, most people, whether they understand the subject matter, most people can sniff out bullshit, right? They just don't. If you don't know the subject matter, you just don't know where the bullshit's coming from, right?
Correct.
But you normally can know if somebody's just blowing smoke. You just may not be able to figure out where that smoke exactly is coming from. So. This is why this stuff is just so important. I just think that it's just so important for people to just. And again, I say it every single podcast. But I say, why? What would be the problem as a lender for the consumer to be educated? It's not going to change the terms you're offering them. It's not going to change the terms that they're allowable under their credit, right? Like if Citibank turns around and says, we'll give you a loan, we're going to give you 14%. You're not going to come back to them and say, well, listen, guy. Look, I think I'm an 8% borrower, so I want 8%. It's not a negotiation. They're going to lend to you at that number anyway, right?
Correct.
So why is there just so much? Why is it that there's this constant level of misinformation that exists? Because it's not going to change the individual's ability to borrow, and all it does is allow people to make money that shouldn't be making money off the misinformation, right?
Correct.
Which is disturbing.
Yes. Okay. All right, cool. So I got DL. I don't know if he's a customer of ours. Sometimes people that don't put their whole name, I won't be able to tell you. But he said, is it too late to send dispute letters and get them in without being rebutted by the collection agencies?
Yeah, that wouldn't be a client of ours because we don't. That has nothing to do with our process, nor does it even make sense.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't even understand the question because you shouldn't. I mean, I don't even know how you would theoretically dispute. I'm not trying to crap on anybody that does it. I just don't. I don't know how you could have success disputing with the creditor. I mean, we've been doing this 10 years, almost 10,000 clients. 99% of the times, the creditors always defend their position. So if your sole angle is to dispute with the creditor themselves, I think you're going to have a lot of difficulty. If that's the approach, so I don't know. I don't really understand the question because I don't understand the approach because I don't know how that would be a viable way of trying to get accounts off. Sometimes you can have some flexibility with collection companies, but I mean, even then, it's not a real sustainable way to do it. You might get a spotty here, spotty. It just doesn't. It's not sustainable, in my opinion. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that question.
Okay. All right. So Big Brother Life says, okay, thanks. I get using a management company with a business line. Makes sense. Leo's just said, should someone consider buying a house outright using 401k to flip before the 5-year payoff requirement?
Well, you're capped on a certain amount that you can borrow from your 401k.
And you get tax, right? 10%?
Well, it depends. It depends if you take it as a loan. You don't get taxed if you take it as a loan, but it's got to come out of your paycheck. If you take it as a cash, there's different, depending on who's holding it, there's different requirements. Like if it's through your employer's plan and you borrow against it, they'll take, and they know you're getting a wage, they'll take the money out, right? So for instance, it'll get treated as a loan with a certain amount that'll come out of each one of your paychecks to pay it back, right? So you don't get to really control it. If you're taking a lump sum, yeah, you get rocked tax wise. If you're under 60, what is it, like 66 or 65, something like that, you get taxed like
extraordinarily. And you're only allowed to take a certain portion. It's like a capped amount. It's not like, so if you're buying if your 401k has 180 grand in it, you can't take 160 grand out of it. They don't allow you to do that because chances are you're invested in something. So they're lending you against that. Like in 401ks, you're fully vested. So if you have $180,000 in account liquidity in your 401k, most cases when you're borrowing again, you're literally borrowing against that, right? So like in essence, they're not selling anything because it's in the market. Now, if you were going to turn around and actually liquidate it and not pay it back, they have to force sale some things in order to be able to get you that capital because it's not in the market at that point. So I personally, I'm much more from the school of, and I tell this to clients all the time. I mean, your retirement is your retirement. That's meant if you've gone to the extent of putting in a 401k, unless it's an absolute emergency and you have no other options, I don't even know why you look at it, right? I mean, people drive themselves nuts looking at these 401ks when the market tanks and stuff. I don't know what you're doing because you can't day trade it. So what are you wasting your time looking at it for? It is what it is. And if you go back on a 40, 50 year, graph on the S&P, it's literally like a hockey stick. I mean, stop worrying about if you're in a 401k and an IRA, stop worrying about it. You can't take money out of it anyway. So you fretting about it when the market dumps 30% does absolutely nothing. And the good thing is that whoever your active manager is, whether it's Vanguard, Fidelity, they're buying when it dumps. So you continue to lower your cost base every time it goes down. All these people, when the market was tanking about their 401s, were going nuts. The thing they don't realize is they're actually buying down there, though. So when the market drops 35%, if your cost base was originally on the Dow at $27,000, and because of the dump, it dropped you another 1,000, 2,000 points, you get down to 25,000 as your cost base on the Dow futures. I mean, that just made you a lot of money long term, right? Because you just lowered your overall cost base and it helped. So people are just so consumed with the short term. But no, I would not borrow against your 401k ever. Unless it's an absolute emergency. I mean, there's more than enough credit out there if your credit's in place, and you take the advice of professionals and you do the right things, that you shouldn't have to take out against it. If it's an emergency, you got to do what you got to do, and there are tremendous tax consequences associated with it and everything like that. And there is a cap on it, but I mean, I would definitely advise people against taking from that if they can.
Yep. Okay, DL said, I'm talking about taking advantage of the stay-at-home order. No one in the office. No replies to the disputes in theory. Am I correct?
No. And we've talked about this,
That's
first
like
it was.
That's like saying if the bureaus are going to close doing the Rona.
No. Hold on. Let's go through the timeline, okay? Let's go through the timeline because I love doing this.
Okay.
So in the beginning, when this all started, it was the bureaus are closed. Everybody, listen, get your disputes in because nobody's going to respond, right?
Correct.
Because that makes logical sense, right? I mean, of course they would just stop doing business, and all the 350, 400 million people in this country would stop getting information on the credit reports just because, the normal human being is at home. Of course that would happen. Then we had to make a whole cast about it in order to explain how not viable that was, right? And that was back in March, right? So that took about 2 weeks for that to go away, and people realized that was a bunch of BS. Then the same people that were pushing that sales theory moved on to, now it's not the bureaus anymore. They're definitely working, right? So they're absolutely there. But evidently the creditors now aren't working. Well, I got news for you. Call any one of your creditors right now. They're all answering the phones. They're not responding to disputes. They're responding just like the bureaus are responding, just like everybody is, because this is how the world works. This is how our economy flows. It is a very large part of our economy, credit and the reporting of it, for the purpose of saving the banks and protecting them against risk, but more importantly for the ability to grease the wheel with the consumer and their ability to get credit when they need it and they deserve it as a result of the reports. So there wasn't ever a situation, in any situation, where either one of them were going to stop reporting under any circumstance. So I figure it took about 2 weeks for the idea behind the bureaus to flake out, right? Yeah. Once we disprove that rumor. This one's about 2 weeks in, so this one should start to flake out soon. Once it starts to kind of wear off of Facebook, I guess, is where maybe I don't know where, it's one of them that it's been like a bad rash that won't go away, but it eventually will when you get through one cycle and you realize, no, that's not true either. So unfortunately, to answer his original question, no, they haven't stopped responding ever, and they're not going to stop responding. And there's no COVID-related exception that exists in this situation. The bureaus haven't stopped working. The creditors haven't stopped working. The collection companies seem like they're working harder. I don't see anywhere where there's some kind of a gap that desperately want to find to be able to weave in and out of and act like we're just run like some third world country that doesn't have uniformity in it, economically speaking. So unfortunately, that's not accurate, sadly.
Okay. All right, DL. Okay, Freddie, which is our recent customer whose mom started yesterday, asks, can you still get interest-only loan on a primary home? If so, what are the criteria for them?
Yeah, no. I mean, there are some. It's very, very rare because a lot of lenders took a beating in 08 from it. So a lot of them did away with it. And as we've talked about in previous podcasts, 95% of the mortgages that are originated in our country are sold to Fannie and Freddie, which means they have to fit within a certain box. Those boxes are VA. Those boxes are FHA. That box is conventional. Anything over conventional is jumbo. That's how it works. Now, they need to fit within a certain box within those particular boxes because they all get packaged up within those certain boxes and they get sold, right? They get sold to Fannie and Freddie, who basically earn the interest on them, or whatever bank you originated them with. Makes basically a yield spread on servicing, which is typically anywhere from 75 basis points to 80 basis points to collect the calls and deal with the nonsense. Hear people yelling, screaming, calling them terrible people. And that's what they get paid to just stay on the front end of it. Now, as far as interest-only loans, a lot of banks took a beating from them back in 08 because, unfortunately, when the market turned, there was no principal paid down. And they were stuck. So they did away with a lot of that. I haven't seen them. I would say there's a very low, if there even is a possibility that there is. I'm not aware of them.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say maybe there is. I just don't know. It's not in wide purview. Let's put it that way. So if there is one available, it's not a common one. And I know Fannie and Freddie aren't buying them. So as a result of that, if there is one, it's just not one widely offered. I don't believe.
Okay. All right, cool. So Andrew asked, so would this be a good time to invest in real estate? REITs, real estate investment trusts, pros and cons. Please explain. Got a few people interested in them.
Okay, so you got to understand how real estate investment trusts work, right? The real estate investment trusts are typically large conglomerates that buy, they're owned by their investors, and effectively they buy shopping centers and such. So they organize it, they take that against the property, and the difference effectively goes back to whoever the shareholders are of that particular REIT, right? If you're an owner of the REIT, typically it gets paid back through. Some are publicly traded, some aren't. If it's not publicly traded and you don't get any equity appreciation on the stock, then you get it through a dividend. Here's the problem. Again, most of these REITs own super shopping centers, big office buildings, the things that are most exposed right now. And if you sincerely believe that in the next couple months or in the foreseeable future that people are going to rush back in to restaurants and shopping malls, and we're going to be back to a situation where everybody gets out of their house and they start working in offices again, and stadiums and stuff like that, these big scenarios that basically our entire society has ran in the other direction from, then yeah, I think it would be good. Here's the problem, though. They're cutting their dividends. Their stocks are getting torched as a result because there's no end in sight. And I think you really have to have a very vivid imagination if you sincerely believe that somehow, some way, people are going to rush back into that, because I think it's going to be very difficult over the course of time when the government is allowing retailers to not pay their rent, right? And these are the same people that help to pay for these REITs. Are the commercial tenants and the offices and things like that. All the same people that are arguing that they're not paying right now, right? That they're literally not going to pay, and they'll pay effectively when society starts to shame them for not paying, which could be a while. There's big companies that haven't paid their rent, because they don't feel like they have to, because it's the uncertainty of the market. So I personally, I wouldn't, in an environment like that where it's so undecided, I wouldn't. I personally wouldn't. I mean, the only thing I would suggest, if you do like a particular REIT, look up that particular REIT and see what their holdings are specifically, because you should be able to identify. It's all public. If it's a public company, it's public record, right? So you should be able to see what holdings they have. If you go through the holdings and you say, you know what, look, I think that these particular pieces will recover, and you can get it on the dip, then go for it. But I think it's going to be a really tough business. Not to mention, I mean, I had this conversation with a restaurateur that owns like 4 or 5 restaurants down here in Palm Beach, and if it's like a commercial establishment like that, where you're dealing in a situation where they're literally having to cut down the amount of people they can bring in there, it's effectively going to cut their bottom line 20-30%. If we have to do 6 feet and all these restaurants have to reestablish what that maintenance level is, it's going to change the amount of people they can bring in. It's going to change the amount of people they can roll over. It's going to directly impact their ability to make money and the amount of money they can make. And that's not going to be specific to one particular restaurant. Some restaurants won't even reopen because there's just no way to do the math to make it work. But all these REITs are going to have to get renegotiated with a lot of these tenants because the market's changing. And I know you guys aren't seeing that right now. And in theory, right now, you're looking at it like, oh, it could open back up and everything go back. No. Forget about the guy that just posted that he sold a property over $20,000. That's great, but the guy that just bought it is not going to be happy in 6 to 9 to 12 months, right? I'm just telling you, this is just an unwinding. It's a natural unwinding that's existing, and this is what's going to happen with REITs. You're going to see, because these REIT prices, if you go to any commercial establishment anywhere in any major metropolitan area, all the rent rates have been absurdly high. Yes. Absurdly high, yes. Insanely high, just like the values were high, just like everything else, right? So as you start to see an unwinding, every asset unwinds. So you see the real estate prices start to unwind. You'll see the rents start to unwind. Everything basically corrects itself. It's an asset repricing. And as a result of that, landlords are going to have to come down. And that's the conversation I had with the restaurateur last week. The landlord's going to have to, he's going to have to come down. He doesn't have a choice. There's no power in that instance, because this guy was paying $55,000, almost $60,000 a month in rent. Okay. For one location, he's paying $55,000, $60,000 a month. Now it was good. It's okay when he's making 5.7, 5.8 out of that restaurant, right? $5.7, $5.8 million. The problem is when that restaurant goes from making 5.7 to 5.8 down to 4.2, 4.5, which is very real. It's a very real idea to drop 25% in the course of a calendar. It might be more, but let's just say I think that's a conservative number. Okay. You can't cover that. You just lost 25%. So what should happen is the rent should adjust accordingly. Otherwise, they don't get the rent, A, and if they move the guy out of there, how hard is it going to be right now to find a restaurant to come in this market or anytime soon to fill that space? Possible. It's an impossible task. So the landlords are backed in, and this long story is to tie back to REITs, because this is the story of a REIT right now. This is what they're dealing with. This is exactly what they're dealing with everywhere. Any of the major REITs, whether it be shopping malls and Simon Properties or any of the other large REITs, you're seeing the same thing everywhere. It's a constant renegotiation that's going to reflect in the actual returns and the earnings, which is ultimately going to destroy the value, if it already hasn't, of the equities, and then diminish the return on the dividend if they can even offer it. So the purpose of owning a REIT is to be able to get the dividend. If that dividend and that return is, potentially at risk, there'd be zero reason to own a REIT until you know with 100% certainty that that market has bottomed, and then you go in and buy, because you know it's not going any lower at that point, wherever that rests.
Wow. That's it, John?
That question.
Andrew, you already know. Okay, Leah has another question. Should someone take advantage of a city township grant to buy a home and slowly renovate while living there until they can legally put it on the market for a return, usually 5 years?
Do they mean a grant, like as far as down payment assistance type grant? Is that what they mean?
Is that what you mean, Leo? Down payment assistance? Because I think in Bergen County they have that. I think my brother-in-law's
No. Every county gets a certain amount of money from the government to be able to offer that.
Oh,
it's just you have to qualify for that, and there's only certain lenders that are approved to offer it. But they definitely, every county gets a certain amount of money from the federal government in order to be able to do that. It's just it's a finite amount of money, and it goes pretty quick.
Yeah.
But anyway, if that's what he was talking about, he or she, and that's the case, yeah, man, why not? I mean, look, if somebody's coming in and they know they got a good deal, and they can build some sweat equity with the idea of getting help to get into the property, knowing after a certain period they're forced to hold it for 5 years, which in all likelihood would only help you because it'll only allow the house the opportunity to build equity. I see no downside, not even a little one.
Yeah, something like that. That's what Leo said. Yeah, so it is that. That's what he means.
Yeah, but yeah, I see no downside. Look, I think there's going to come opportunity. I've said this in earlier casts. I think there's going to be opportunities over the course of the next 12 to 18 months where just, because FHA will even in the armpit of 08, 09, the FHA was still lending, and they even dropped it. The FHA limit used to be, and I'm 95% sure, but I think it was 660 before 08. And then after 08, just in an effort to keep the housing market going, because it's an absolute imperative to our overall economy, they dropped it down to 620. We've been sitting at 620. So even when the economy improved, they didn't raise it back up. They just left it there. Yeah. So don't be surprised if things get tough, if they continue to go out of their way to try and find ways to help facilitate the FHA mortgage market in an effort to keep mortgages going. Because even in a slow market, even when the quote-unquote market was recovering in 08, 09, 2010, recovering is not anywhere near full force. Full force being where we were at, obviously in beginning of January, before all this kind of set in. So I think, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people going into next year and stuff where they may be able to just find that, like I said before, they may be able to find the house they've always wanted just at a much more economical price. Now, hopefully the wages haven't contracted at that point to the extent where it's taking money out of people's pockets, because then it becomes a relative move, right? If real estate values go down 10% and wage goes down 10%, then it really isn't doing you any favors, right? Yeah. So it ends up doing you a favor if you can maintain the same amount of income and values drop, then it obviously is qualifying you for a situation, assuming lending parameters stay the same. So I think given where the wage is at, $55,000 a year, the average wage in this country, and the fact that even on a good year it might go up 1%, that even if we cut back, I don't think there's any way that it'll ever track directly with the market contracting. You know what I mean?
Okay. I'm pretty sure he got that answer. Another question. How DL asked the question, how can I learn the construction side of the investment cycle? ? Do I have to go to school to learn how to do the work, or is there a way to learn the labor material cost?
Oh, the labor material. See, the work. I mean, I look. I'm not somebody that is personally that's great with my hands. So I'm not out like laying drywall. I'm good with numbers and other things. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, obviously you bring in good contractors, and that's a trial and error process. That's not something that happens overnight, unfortunately. And that's what anybody goes through. But the one thing you can do, if you're getting into it, is to familiarize yourself with the cost of things, right? Familiarize yourself with how much drywall costs, how many sheets would it take to fill a house, right? Like on an average house, an average 3-story house, when I would do a gut on a renovation, it'd be 175 sheets, right? And I had a company that I used to use the same company as Toll Brothers, same exact company that Toll Brothers used, I used. And that was a coincidence. I didn't do that intentionally. It just worked out. When you start to sharpen your pencil enough, you get to the guys that do it the best, the most efficient, at the cheapest price.
Toll Brothers is a commercial real estate investment company, right?
Toll Brothers is the biggest home builder in our entire country.
Maybe that. Home builder. I think I seen them in investment. I mean, in commercial properties here in Jersey.
They own. I mean, they're a publicly traded company. They're huge, but they're from their headquarters is in Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania. Okay. So it's right outside of Philly. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make though is that when you
when you do your research, you should know all these things. You should know how many sheets this takes. You should know what a 2x4 costs. You should know, things like that. You should know what an average bathroom should cost. You should have a price per square foot on the tile to purchase. You should have a price per square foot on what your tile guy is charging you, right? So you can get a full number there. You should, your floor guy should be a price per square foot on the floor to install the floor. And as you get better at it, you'll start to wind that number down, right? So basically get to that contractor's minimal number that he's willing to take where it still makes sense for him to do. And that's when you know you found the right price. And you can pretty much get into that because, like I said before, once you figure out what the material is, a lot of contractors try to get you because they'll just lump in material and labor, right? And they'll just give you a big question mark. You have no idea where that number came from. But there's actually arithmetic in that number. If you can back out the material, say this guy, if you back out the material, then you'll be able to identify what the labor charge is. If it's some outlandish labor charge, then the guy's just trying to. I mean, look, it's a free market. Contractors are free market runners, so they should be able to get as much as they want. But if you're over there trying to buy the service, then you're going to want to get it as low as possible. So, and if you know all the numbers in the conversation, it'll give you some opportunity to know what kind of flex that they have on the amount of time the job's going to take as far as the cost.
Correct. Okay, you got that. I'm telling you, these questions are coming in mostly on YouTube, where people mostly watch us. So Freddie asked, can lenders tighten up even more if they're upstick on foreclosures in the next few months? Example, Chase 700 score and 20% down payment. You remember?
So again, we talked about this before. That Chase program, that's not an FHA program. That's their way of just pushing business away because they're so overwhelmed with the PPP, and plus the fact that there's so much uncertainty right now surrounding the market and just things in general. They don't want to be exposed. They don't want to put money out on the street that they're ultimately going to have to take back, right? That's why in large part, there's still a fairly significant amount of lenders outside of the PPP and the SBA loans that really aren't lending a lot of money right now. It's just not happening. It's not the same amount of activity. But to answer his original question, it absolutely can continue to contract for sure. And I've said in previous casts, typically speaking, the bank's lending parameters contract as the economy contracts, right? So if you do the math and you say to yourself, again, this is just an ipso facto scenario, but if you figure that in the last 5 weeks, 30 million people into last week are on unemployment.
That number came in quick.
Are on unemployment. One month, and that's not even showing April yet. Okay, we run a week behind, so keep in mind we're at 30 million now. It's at least another 15 to 20 next month, and I'm lowballing because it's stabilizing now around 3-4 million. Right, is about what the last 2 or 3 weeks have been, about 4 million a week, roughly, give or take. So you figure another 15, 16 million next. That's 50 million people. That's 15% of our entire population. That's insanity, and that's in 8 to 9 weeks. So for everybody that's questioning whether the economy is going to pull back, you don't need to understand all the specifics around it. Just understand when you take 15 to 20% of the people that can purchase something and you extract them from the buyer base, you're going to have a 20% knockdown because the other 80% aren't going to pay 20% more to cover their back. You understand what I mean? It's just the way it works. It's just economy. It's just a natural flow when you lose jobs. And here's the problem. The problem, without getting into a long conversation about this, is the fact that the way unemployment, it's great for right now. The way unemployment is set up right now is people are effectively getting more unemployment than they were probably making when they were working, right?
Yeah,
which is great.
People are taking advantage of that right now. I mean, it is what it is for people who are in the employment market. But there are things right now where, the PPP, they're getting that payroll protection program, but yet, these people, they don't want to work. They're rather collect.
That's what I was going to say is when you extract, and hold on, that's not even scaling out, by the way, too. That's just April and May. We're looking at maybe if we scale out, maybe 45, 50 million people over 2 months. Let's just say we get into June and things don't improve. That could be another 10. So in all theory, we could be into the summer. In all reality, without really going high, we could be through the summer if this doesn't open back up aggressively. I don't know, 60 million people on unemployment.
Whoa.
65 million people on unemployment, right? And that's you're talking about.
No, in 4 months. We had 30 in 1 month.
No, I'm just saying that they're going to be in unemployment for 6 months.
No, but they don't have to, and that was the point I was making earlier. The problem is that when you literally say, look, you got fired, we had something to do with it. It is what it is. We're going to give you more money now than you were making, but it'll be on unemployment, right?
Yes.
How are you going to tell that person that may be lackadaisical, may be unmotivated, which is a large majority of our population, right? And you're going to tell them, and you're going to say, listen, guy, we got a job for you now. And this guy's saying, listen, I'm making more money on unemployment than I would ever make when you hire me because wages just went down. How do you get that guy off the couch?
That's the big problem with universal basic income, Jay.
But there's a but that's not us though. That's the problem. That is a problem with universal and a socialist economy. That's not what we're in right now, right? No. So the problem is that they're trying to apply socialist agendas in a capitalistic environment, and the problem you're going to deal with is trying to drag these people back out. So this is kind of walking everybody towards this, is trying to explain why I am saying the things I am about real estate, right? Number one, you can't qualify for a mortgage with unemployment income. I just want to be clear about that so everybody understands. Okay, and a lot of the people that are getting money through this stuff are not, and this is a guess, this is my own personal opinion, but I can't imagine they're not living lavishly. They're probably just enjoying the fact that they're existing right now. They make enough money to survive. They're probably saving money because, who knows what is going to happen, right? Correct. But they're not going back and putting it in the economy. Because why would they? They can't even leave their house right now. So, and who knows when they're going to be comfortable leaving their house again. So this thing has legs, right? This thing, it's inevitable. I mean, you can't deny the numbers. If you don't want to believe the theory of the idea that the market's going to pull back, then in essence, let me repeat back to you what you're effectively saying. You're saying in the next 3 months, in 1 month, just in 1 month, our unemployment rate spiked to 10%. Higher than it was at, because effectively we were at like 2 or 3% unemployment, and now we just had 30 million claims this month, and we live in a country last census that was 350 million people. So effectively you're talking 10%, right? Just in 1 month. Yeah. So let's say it scales out and it goes 10, then 7, then 5, then 3, which is absolutely plausible, right? You're talking about a situation where 60, 70 million people could be unemployed over the course of time, which you get up into 18 to 20%, which are numbers that are being thrown around. You're telling me that the other 75 to 80% of the people are going to now, buy just as many properties, pay for more? They're going to go out and they're going to buy twice. They're going to go out to the restaurants twice as much when the wage is going down and values are dropping? No, those 75 to 80% of the people are going to be sitting there and they're going to sit back because they're going to be in a position where they're like, you know what? I'm going to be smart about this. They're not going to be out there buying the latest Apple product. It's not that kind of a market, man. It's just not. And I think it's great how, Facebook works both ways. So does YouTube, where they run people up and then they knock them down, and it's either really doom and gloom or It's really, highball and bullshit, right? Correct. It's not ever like a middle real talk type shit. It's just nonsense on extremes. It's like a bipolar conversation, right? It really is. Whenever you go on there, it's people either pushing one extreme or they're pushing another extreme. And the reality is it's none of it's ever accurate. You could probably do the opposite of whatever you learn on there, and you'd probably be right 100% of the time, right? So, I just think if you understand even the stuff about the economy, you'll understand that just keep monitoring those numbers and you'll be able to determine how a lot of this stuff's going to play itself out. If the unemployment numbers continue to dump, go back to the last economy where unemployment was at 18%. Just do some math on your own. Look at the last time our country was in an 18 to 20% unemployment rate. And by the way, we just had 10 this month, right? So it's not that far off. It's not like I'm throwing 50% out there. We're literally 1 month with 30 million unemployment claims. And the last 2 weeks were almost identical. They didn't wane that much. So you're still getting a lot of new claims. These are all new claims. These aren't existing claims. So you're talking about a situation, if you understand that, then you know that when you extract 25 to 30% of anything, you're 25 to 30% weaker. And that's going to correlate directly to GDP, to banks' lending abilities, to all this stuff. It's going to tie back to everything. It's just how our economy works. It's all intertwined. Like I said earlier with the credit bureaus and the collectors responding to disputes and stuff. You can't extract that out of it. It all runs in the same wheel. It's a giant system that runs together. When something drops, the other part has to go with it. There's no way to fight it.
Correct. Okay. Someone asked, will wholesaling be a good business model during these times?
If you have a base of buyers, you know, if you have people that are on the other side of it trying to buy, yeah, for sure. But I think that's where you're going to have trouble, because we talked about this before, and we talked about before was the fact that
wholesalers need an equation, right?
Yeah, but wholesalers have, in a lot of cases, they have no intentions of buying; they're just flipping it, right? So they're trying to make their little percentage in the middle of the broader deal and not strip too much equity. Excuse me, not try to strip too much equity out of the project.
Okay.
You know, and in situations like that, I mean, your only real asset is your base of buyers and how quickly they can move on it. I mean, but I think that base of buyers, as the liquidity, broader liquidity that's available starts to tighten up, that base of buyers is going to tighten up. Okay. You know, you're going to see, if you continue to see what I expect you to see on the real estate side, you're going to see, you know, I mean, there's more people in the real estate business than should be, but you're going to see all that's going to be left are the pros, you know, after this is done, because they're well capitalized. But what, you know, if this ends up being a 12, 18-month shakeout, you know, it's gonna do what it did in 08. It's gonna clean out the amateurs.
Yes.
But it's also gonna make a good opportunity for people coming in.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So
one more question, Jay. DL, if you want to invest in a home that you aren't going to live in, will it cost 20% down on the property? That's a question mark. And then it said, is it smart to create an LLC, buy it with your LLC in order to preserve getting a personal FHA loan later?
There's a lot going on in that question. So let me start with the last question first. So when you buy an investment property, if you do it in your personal name, it's going to report in your personal credit. That's just how it is, even if it's an investment property, right? If you go and you do it in the name of, and you do it in a commercial mortgage, which you should be doing, and anything in the name of a business, you should do it in LLC. It provides you liability protection. It provides you a number of protections. And if it's an S corp, it'll report back to your personal tax return anyway, and you get the tax advantages of it outside of that. What was the other question? Will it protect you? Yeah, if it's in the name of if it's not your primary residence and it's in a commercial mortgage off of your personal credit report, then absolutely you can still go for an FHA loan. It's not going to impact you. FHA is just for primary residence. So as long as it's your primary residence, it used to be first-time home buyer. Then 2008 came, and just like they dropped the credit from 660 to 620, they also changed the requirements. So it's no longer just the first-time home buyers program. It's just for primary residents. So yes, if you did it the way I said, you would be able to do both.
Okay, so we got Freddie, who's saying right now, I think buy now if you can get a great deal. Ride the wave after that. What are your thoughts? He said, I think buy now.
So he's saying he thinks you should buy now? Is that
yes,
if I'm
yes,
okay.
That's why he's asking what are our thoughts.
No, I don't think that at all. I've been very. I mean, if this is, I think this is the first time Freddie's listening to us, so that's why. But it's since the beginning, since this all started, before it all played itself out. Freddie, feel free to go back to some of our first ones from a couple months ago when this all started. I said the same thing. I mean, I've been running this almost to a T since it started as far as what to expect, and this isn't any different. It takes a little while for the real estate market to turn. It doesn't matter the market. You know, it moves like an aircraft carrier, and like an aircraft carrier, when it turns, it takes a little while to turn. And that's the process we're going in right now. And then as it starts to turn and it gets a much clearer signal, it starts to move in that direction. And it typically moves in that direction for quite some time. So you can see a bottoming process that's going to go on. I mean, the one perk is that you're going to have low interest rates as the values start to drop. But I personally think over the course of time, with unemployment, with the lack of demand, with the supply that exists, even though a lot of people have pulled it off, there's going to be supply that's going to come up. It's going to help to dilute prices as well. All that stuff's going to contribute to dropping prices. You buy now and you over-lever, buy a $200,000 property now, and that market drops 25%. You levered it FHA at 96%. You're going to be upside down $15,000 in the first 6 months. You know, and then who knows what happens in the next 6 to 12 months? Lose another 10% theoretically, right? I mean, why not just wait, be patient? Because even if they don't drop exponentially, there's nobody buying right now. As case in point, by sales down 27% year over year. So, I mean, you're talking about that means just the sales up through March were down 27%. April was effectively a zombie month. So I can't even imagine what April's going to be. So
I wouldn't, but if you're somebody that doesn't care about any zigs and zags and you're in it for the next 20 years, it's not going to matter.
That's true.
It's just a vanity play, right? To buy it at the right number, because if you don't really care about that, the objective is to just stay there for the next 30 years and you love it. Who cares when you buy it? Buy it at $1 million. It could be worth 10 cents later on in life. It doesn't matter because you don't care about that. But if you're somebody that does care about that, which I personally think you should, then I think there's going to be a lot of better opportunities personally.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, John. We're already an hour 49 minutes. Just like that. I mean, these podcasts, Jay, time just flies, especially when we get in questions like this. But as you can see, you could basically ask us any question concerning credit, and we have an answer for you. And it's not like theoretically speaking. It's, to the point, from experience, what John thinks is going to be the best for
but
you.
Keep in mind, though, all the stuff I talk about is stuff that I do on a regular. I mean, this isn't coming from an opinion. I didn't watch this on a YouTube video. I bought and renovated and built many, many houses. I run a small private equity fund that I invest in the market. We lend in certain instances based upon that. I do all this stuff every single day, which is why I have knowledge. So I'm trying to get knowledge so that as a consumer, everybody can understand exactly how these things work from somebody that knows how they work. I'm not giving an opinion. The stuff that I say is factual. I know a lot of people on YouTube and Facebook and stuff can present it as fact, but it ends up being a small modicum of fact with a lot of bit of exaggeration and potential manipulation. I'm not saying everybody, I'm saying some people. So please understand that when we're giving this information, this is us really, really, really trying to assist. It's not, we're taking the time here, hours at night, and we don't sales pitch our stuff. I mean, we're not here for an hour and a half talking about how good we are, what we do. Or we're not talking about, these aren't sales blurbs steering you back to utilizing us. We did a whole podcast on real estate investing, and we don't even offer. Somebody asked earlier, do we offer a book where you can buy it? No, we don't even offer that. This is strictly for your education. Right? This is all, it's strictly for that education, so you understand what to do. And if it helps one person, then it was worth it, right? So if you know somebody that could potentially help and you think this was useful, then please, by all means, forward it over to them, because that's the purpose of a large majority of the purpose of us doing this when we talk about credit stuff. It also allows people potentially interested in moving forward with us to understand the legitimacy and the knowledge of the people they're going to be operating with, So it's a way for us to be more transparent, but also assist and educate at the same time.
Okay, Jay, real quick. How will the amateur investor get beaten or pushed out of the market versus the professional? What would an amateur need to know to compete and win?
So you just have to pick and choose. You have to be, the timing is, having patience in this kind of a market is important. The way the professional prevails is because of the capital, right? They have more capital, they have more access to capital. That's real estate. So the thing where people get squeezed in real estate is that they effectively, what happens is the capital dries up. But if you have your own pools of capital, and you're bigger and you're larger and you have different forms of capital, whether it be the equity markets, private investors, etc., then even when there's downturns, it gives you opportunity to capitalize on it. The individual investor, somebody being interested, needs to really be smart, because especially in the early going, those deals are important because it helps to build the broader portfolio, it helps to build up capital. So you can't just be walking in markets that are reckless like this, or potentially be reckless like this, buy anything and think it's going to work. I mean, you got to really, really, really be patient. You got to wait for that low-hanging fruit to drop on your lap, and then you got to move on it. And it's important to understand all these other variables month over month. You got to be tracking unemployment and stuff if you really want to learn how to do it. Like I said earlier, man, the only way to do something right, the only way to execute something right is to be prepared, to come up with a plan. If you run roughshod and you're not good at running roughshod and you're just doing it because you see somebody do it on TV, the probabilities of that being successful are limited to none. And people are surprised when stuff doesn't work out. And unfortunately, it didn't work out because it's not properly planned. But if you properly understand what you're getting yourself into, and you understand where your strengths and your weaknesses are, and where you can hedge yourself in certain cases on these deals, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you walk in with the knowledge and you wait for that right property when the market starts to bottom, it's going to be the right place to start. Trust me. Especially in a situation like this, if you're preparing yourself and you're sitting back and you're being smart about all this, I mean, there's going to be a lot of opportunity, and if with the right amount of patience, it can really be beneficial to a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't be wouldn't necessarily be looking, right? And now they're smart enough. We've become smarter as a society to start looking in situations like this, and they want to capitalize on it. And I think, you know, it doesn't need to be a zero-sum situation. Those people that need to sell, and then you have another base of buyers that come in, and they're going to be the buyers for a long period of time. So I just think that, you know, for anything, I would say have patience, have a tremendous amount of patience. Don't be hasty, especially right now. And as a result of that, you're going to see opportunities that will present themselves. And it may not look like such a great opportunity at the time, because what typically happens is as real estate prices come down, you're going to see other things come down, and everybody's not going to be so upbeat, but you're going to need to identify that opportunity relative to where maybe that property was before. It's not like it's going to be, yeah, this economy is great, and you know, the values are down 35%. No. You know, you're buying when it's not going to be pretty, but you'll be able to identify when things start to bottom, because values will stop going lower. There will eventually be a floor where supply hits demand, and that demand will eventually re-enter itself when the prices are right, and capital will start to insert itself at certain levels, which will help because that's a level they're comfortable with, right? So it'll all work in conjunction, and you'll be able to identify. It's just going to take some time for a lot of this to unwind.
Well, during that time, just be prepared for it. Have better credit.
I think what everybody's doing now in the model of trying to position yourself and get yourself, I think it's genius. I think it's great. I mean, if there wasn't people coming to us like this and doing this, I think we would probably want to make a podcast strictly about that, right? But we're getting people, even though I think we did earlier on, but we talked about it, but we're getting a lot of people that are doing it, and that's their motto, and I think it's great. I love it, because you don't, and they're not like professionals, right? They're people that just want to get into it, but they got the foresight and the intelligence to be like, well, I just want to position myself right, so when I see that chance, I think it's great. It's exactly the kind of mentality you should have, right?
Yes. All right, Jay, I don't want to keep you on anymore. It's almost an hour, 56 minutes. If you guys are getting all this free knowledge, thank you so much for logging on. One of the best things you could do is just click on the like button and share button. That's how you guys can help us out. Or share this content to a friend, recommend a friend to us. People always recommending us, people starting credit repair with us all the time. Anything else you want to say, Jay?
No, I just like you said, I mean,
okay.
If there's anybody that's listening to this that knows anybody to be helped by this information, definitely send it out. Like I said, this is education we want to get out to as many people as possible, because I think it helps, and any little bit can help, especially in situations like this, where it could be the difference between somebody missing an opportunity and getting an opportunity, or somebody figuring out a way to get themselves out of an opportunity, or not an opportunity, a bad situation, right? So, I mean, all of these podcasts try to give people the right amount of knowledge to be able to navigate through their own situation.
You got it, Jay. All right, Jay. Thank you so much. See you later. Bye-bye. My people, you guys got us here for 2 hours. Jeez. Listen, reality is true. Just like the content, like the video. Totally appreciate it if you guys do that. We want to still grow. We only have about 15,800 subscribers. I mean, with the content that we do, we could have 50,000 subscribers and people, and we could have more people asking questions at the same time. You getting the knowledge, because that's what you're here for, to get that knowledge. Anyways, my people, I want to say thank you so much for logging on. Thank you to everyone who started credit repair. April was a great month for us, actually one of the best months of doing credit repair. A lot of people started credit repair, and thank you for the new customers that we're getting here that are watching us on YouTube. No problem, DL. Well, thank you for your questions. And we're gonna, whatever podcast you want us to have and ideas, please write them in the comment box. We're gonna get we're always looking for content to create every Monday, 6 p.m. We're here for you. Thank you, everybody on Facebook. And as I leave, you guys know what your favorite song is. I had somebody in Texas call me today. He told me he loved the GizzyCredit.
Anything you want, then you can get it. Don't be scared, because then you'll regret it. Hollywood legend.
Oh.
GizzyCredit.
I'm gonna see you later.
Anything you want, then you can get it. Don't be scared, because then you'll regret it. You no longer gotta look pathetic. GizzyCredit. Anything you want, then you can get it. Don't get scammed, cause then you'll regret it. You no longer gotta look pathetic. Look pathetic. Gizzy. GizzyCredit. Anything you want, then you can get it. Don't get scammed, cause then you'll regret it. You no longer gotta look pathetic. Look pathetic. GizzyCredit. Don't get scammed. What you need is just a change of plans. And time is money, you know, get that cash. Before it comes, just get it fast, get it fast. GizzyCredit. 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 GizzyCredit.
Take care.